Welcome to Front Office Pros. We got a bonus episode for you. That's right. Matt Montgomery is back with us from Footballguys, and we're going to be talking about his bread and butter IDP Dynasty trade targets.
Hike!
All right, guys. So just like our most recent video, we're going to be giving a trade target for a contending team and a rebuilding team. So, Matt, what is your Dynasty IDP trade target for contending teams?
Well, if you're a contending team, an IDP, and honestly, if you're a rebuild team too, the foundation of your team should be tackle floors. Tackles in the name of the game. It is the defensive version of yards, receiving or rushing. And I think one of the better players that we are seeing with consistent tackle floors with the high upside is the Lions safety, Brian Branch. Safety value is not high. People just look at safeties and corners, and they're a dime a dozen, and why do I care to have him on my team? I don't want you to trade me your cast off. I'll wait till you drop him, and I'll pick him up off waivers. But Brian Branch is a little bit different. He's got the name recognition, so there are going to be people that are going to be less likely to trade off of him, and that's why I think you're probably going to have to overpay. But overpaying for a safety is not really overpaying, in my opinion, for the value that this guy can bring your team. I said this in the other video. I like targeting, ironically, it was another Detroit Lion, but I like targeting good players on good teams. And Brian Branch, I believe, if he's not already the focal point of this defense, he will become that guy. He is kind of taking on that Alabama secondary pedigree. He's brought it to the NFL. He, in his first game of his career, I believe, he had a pick six, did he not, against the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. So he immediately made his presence known the first game he had as a rookie, and he has continued to build on that. Now we are seeing a little bit of a dip, and I dip by his standards. He's still performing at a pretty high level. That's why I believe that people are going to look at him and be like, that's safety. I don't really care if you throw me a second or a third round pick. Of course, I'm going to take that and run with it. But he has the stable tackle floor. He's got 70 on the year as of this video, and he's got big play upside. He also has 4 interceptions. But I like to point out specifically in week 6, he had 6 tackles, 2 interceptions, and a forced fumble. There are not many players that are going to be able to pop off the screen like that you're going to have a matchup. That's a week-winning week for a safety. If you have that on your team, you're playing with house money. So guys like that, that's who I want. He's 23 years old, so he's not even in his prime yet, I don't believe. And we're seeing him put up some really good tackle numbers, big explosive plays. He's a good player on a good team. And like I said, people don't value safeties. So go after and go get one that's good.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is Brian Branch's only second season. And he has done a phenomenal job in his first 2 years in the NFL. And I don't know, as far as your scoring goes, but in our league, he's the third best safety. So we score quite a bit of points when it comes to pass deflections and interceptions. So he's good in that category as well. I do think it'll be interesting. Again, it depends on your scoring of your league. I would think if someone tried to trade to get Brian Branch in our league, it would cost a pretty penny. But I mean, what do you think, Joe? I mean, to me, I feel like it would be. I mean, it's got to be. Would it be? It got to be at least a second, maybe a first. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think it would be a pretty penny, but I mean, we also play in a 16-team dynasty league too, so it's a deeper league. But and guys just covet young players in our league, and it's really hard to get them away. And you mentioned it being a second-year player, and he's been a really productive player. I do think it would be tough, but if you could happen to go ahead and prime away, I mean, obviously, he's a really great piece to have on your defense.
All right, Joe. So who is your trade target for IDP players for contending teams?
Yeah, my contending trade target is going to be linebacker Josey Jewell of the Carolina Panthers. And this guy has really come on since that New York Giant game. And then, after the bye week as well, in our league at least, he's been scoring, 4 straight weeks of 20-plus points. He's had a decent amount of tackle numbers, especially the last 2 weeks. He got double-digit tackles. And he's also been getting the sacks. He won against the Chiefs, another one against the Bucs. Then last week against Jalen Hurts, he had a 1.5. Just seems, you mentioned in the other video, Steve, these stingy Carolina Panthers, and it seems like Evero has figured something out on that defense. Obviously, Josey Jewell picked to go to Carolina a lot because Evero reunited from Denver. I just think, he's a nice productive linebacker that's getting you tackles, but then also can get you, the sacks with the blitzing that he's doing, and could be a guy that you can ride out the rest of the season here.
Yeah, I think the familiarity with Jewell and the defense of Evero, I think, is super helpful. Not to mention that, Shaq Thompson's out for the year. I believe they're using a rookie linebacker next to him. So I think, Trevin Wallace, yes, I thought that was his name, but I was like, is it? So good thing you said it. So I think at the end of the day, I like the pick because, and he's the type of player, I'm going to be talking about a guy similar. In our league, you could trade a late round pick for him, and be able to get him because you're talking about somebody who's probably, now he did get a multi-year contract with the Panthers. I think it was a 3-year deal. And if I had to guess the way they structured it with guaranteed money, he's probably going to be in Carolina for 1 more year. I don't think that at one point I thought the Panthers might just clean house. I think Canales saved his job. I think that this they're going to do 1 more year with this coaching staff. So if that's the case, even Jewell might be relevant next year too.
I think that to add to your Carolina point about the volatility, David Tepper is a very quick trigger type of guy. There's a reason he's a billionaire because he'll cut the investment and move on. And sometimes at the team's detriment. So I'm kind of with you there. You never know about cleaning house. I write an article every week, and this week one of the guys I wrote about was Josey Jewell, and it's because I agree with you. I think he's absolutely a buy candidate right now, no matter what format of your league, no matter whether you're contending or rebuilding. I think he's a good, stable guy. I think he will be a cheap guy to acquire. You know what you're getting. You're not getting Roquan Smith. You're not getting Foye, but you're also not going to get skunked on points. He last 4 or 5 weeks, I think he said 3 weeks in a row with a sack, if I recall, which is not often from an inside linebacker like that. So he can obviously rush the quarterback when asked to, but that also tells me that he is in the box and he's not dropping into coverage if he's getting sacked. So that's a big, big time opportunity for tackles there. And like I said at the very beginning, you want guys that are going to tackle the ball carrier, seek and destroy. That's what they need to do, and Josey Jewell does it and is doing it currently at a pretty high level.
Yeah, it just doesn't fit the bill of a good team, though.
Yeah, unfortunately, he seems to play for some bottom feeders.
Yeah. Hey, it could be an up-and-coming team, though. They have been playing stingy.
Really good. Yeah.
So my trade target for contending teams is going to be linebacker Eric Kendricks to the Dallas Cowboys. Similar theme to you, Joe. He has familiarity with the defense. Mike Zimmer was the former head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. Kendricks was there for a long, long time. He now is over in Dallas, and he's basically the QB of the defense. You also saw, unfortunately, the news of DeMarvion Overshown. He now turning his ACL, MCL, and I think PCL.
Yeah.
And he was having a really breakout year for the Cowboys. So at the end of the day, it really is Kendricks in that middle. And if you look at it these past few weeks, he basically has a floor of 10 total tackles every time. So if you have this guy, he's a bankable 10. He had 12 total last time, and he's 32 years old. I think he's maybe this is his last year of relevance, to be honest with you. Maybe the Dallas Cowboys bring him back. I don't know what's going to happen with the Cowboys. They're a mess. Will they will they do a fire sale? Will they not? I don't know. In our league, it's a 16-team league. 7 rounds for the draft. I think you probably could get him for a 4th, maybe a push for a 3rd. I think that might be a little rich. Maybe I do 2 4ths or a 4th and a future 5th or something of that nature. Maybe a smaller player, maybe a young linebacker that hasn't developed, that may not become a thing. But I think he's a guy, if I'm a contending team and I need another linebacker, I think he fits the bill.
Absolutely. I'm torn up about DeMarvion Overshown. I don't know if you guys saw this either. Jerry Jones has a tendency to talk. He had said something that made me extremely nervous that he may not even play next year. So that's how serious they believe this injury is. And if that's, then I don't see them getting rid of Kendricks in the short term, because I think Jerry Jones is one of those dudes that likes stability and he likes players he knows. And like you said, Eric Kendricks, Jerry Jones obviously has full control over this team, but he also strikes me as a guy where if you've got stats, he's going to keep you and he's going to pay you too much. And I think that Eric Kendricks has enough on the box score that it goes, okay, we know what we're getting with this guy. He's going to tackle the ball carrier. You guys can coach him however you want, but I want him on the Dallas Cowboys. And with Overshown down next year, like I said, I'm just gutted about that dude. I love that guy. I think he was ascending into it feels like they're just cursed It went Sean Lee, Leighton Vander Esch to now Overshown, where they've had just these devastating injuries to high caliber linebackers, dude. And it's just I keep eating the cheese and I keep going back to the Cowboys linebacker, but it's like their bodies are just made of glass. Like that dude from SpongeBob where his heart attacks put him to sleep and he's got the sling and everything. That's what I feel like is happening all the time with these linebackers. So I think Eric Kendricks is a slam dunk right now, especially after the Monday night injury to Overshown.
Yeah, 100%. He's a good buy, and like you said, he's just been a tackling machine. And yeah, I'm really torn about the Overshown nose as well. Just I know in another dynasty league that we play in Steve, I had him and took him and had high hopes for him, and finally see it come to fruition. But then now the injury's happening, and I didn't even realize he could even miss next year. I mean, that would just be terrible as well. But it's
Jerry Jones. He says a lot of stuff, but when you have a guy that already has that seed of doubt in his mind that quickly after an injury, it had to be worse than even they're letting on.
But yeah, I know. It's just tough coming back from an ACL, but then let alone all those other ligaments as well.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So transitioning over to the rebuilding side, who's your trade target, Matt?
So in a similar fashion, I've actually been holding on to this one since the offense video because you brought up Scary Terry being 29 and only being in the league for about 6 years. The same thing goes for Kaden Elliss, the linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons. He's 29 years old, and he has also only been in the league for about 5 or 6 years. Because of this, I don't think anybody trusts him. And there was a little bit of time there where I didn't trust him, but I think that he is 100% a linebacker one. I think he has shown us that he can play at a high level. He initially came over from the Saints with his defensive coordinator, and his defensive coordinator went in there. This was post-Foyer, I believe, so he kind of took over for what Foyer left, him and Troy Anderson. We saw Troy Anderson go down early this year. He's been out he just started playing again the last couple of weeks. We're seeing his snaps increase, but we did not see any production drop from Kaden Elliss. And that is why I believe he's the perfect contender for a rebuild, because I do think that with Anderson coming back, there are going to be managers that are scared to have Elliss on their team because, like I said, he's 29. And once they hit 30, it's like suddenly we're afraid that they're not human beings anymore. And suddenly they don't know how to work out or practice or know the game of football. And I think that Kaden Elliss, not being a big name guy, he outplays his name every single week. If you look, if you're not familiar with his game, go look at his stat line over the past 2 months. It's unbelievable. The competition around him doesn't scare me that much. Troy Anderson's amazing when he plays. I mean, I think before he got hurt, he had a 17 tackle game, which is just unheard of. But Kaden Elliss was scoring when he was there, and he scored when he was gone, and he's going to score when he comes back. And then he's having his career year, so you're probably buying at the peak. But like I said, I think there are going to be managers that are scared enough to trade off of him, even with the production, because he's a little bit older and because he hasn't really had sustained success in the NFL. But this is the career year, and I don't see any reason why it would dip outside of a change of scheme or a change of coordinator or if they decide to move off of him. And I just don't see any of those things happening currently.
All right, so I'm going to give you the case against him.
Oh boy, I'm your guys.
I know I'm good for one. Every episode here. So when it comes to dynasty leagues, and I think honestly, Joe and I do a lot of salaries and contracts leagues. So I look at this stuff quite a bit. I always typically like to see what is the contract that the actual player has and kind of predict in the future what I think could happen with the guy. So right now he's got 2 years left on his deal. So next year, he'll only have 1 year left. He'll be 30 years old. He will have an $8.5 million cap hit. And if they cut him, they get $6.75 million back. Now, I can't speak. It's interesting. A lot of times in IDP, they may be high IDP scorers, but they may not be good players. So I can't speak to whether or not Kaden Elliss is a really good player or not. We will find out what the Falcons do in the offseason. If they cut him, obviously they don't. If they keep him, they could have got a savings and they choose not to. So at the end of the day, he's got 1 year left. And here's my concern. yes, Terry Fontenot was the GM at the time when they brought him in, but you're right. Ryan Nielsen was the defensive coordinator. He was with Arthur Smith, but Ryan Nielsen and Arthur Smith are no more, and Raheem Morris is the head coach. So is a linebacker, which is a very important part of a defense. Does he want Kaden Elliss to be that guy in the middle to command the defense? I'm not so certain. He's going to be 30 years old next year. So how much, linebackers can play later in their career. And if you look at Kaden Elliss, he was a special teamer for like the first 3 or 4. So he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires. So I have some cause for concern for Elliss. He's at a career point, which honestly all the points I'm making could benefit, someone like you looking to trade from, because I actually think there are some points, at least that I believe, that are cause for concern, which may allow you to go ahead and acquire him. So we'll find out at the end of the day if he ends up continuing on this pace. I think there are some things, though, that make me concerned enough that I would not be interested in him.
So you are the exact manager that I'm targeting in this particular trade. And that's because I understand those doubts. And this is the gambler mentality. One man's trash, another man's treasure. And I do believe that trades should benefit both managers. So this is when I would get into my favorite part of the salary cap stuff. It's just, let's negotiate, okay? You don't like him, clearly, so I'm not going to pay a lot for him because you don't like him. You know what I mean? You want to get rid of him just as much as I want to acquire him. So let's try to find that common ground. And I liked your take on the not a lot of tread on the tires. He's only played 3 full seasons at linebacker where he's had linebacker snaps. The rest of it's just, you might as well throw it out. He was undrafted out of Idaho, I believe is what it is. So, talk about against all odds, 100% everything. He's not a blue chipper. His coach, everybody that he's familiar with is gone. He played special teams majority of the time. But I'm seeing him in an opportunity now with a defensive head coach, and it's the best season he's ever played. And to me, if nothing changes, if the regime is like, you know what, we're going to throw this year out because Kirk Cousins is dust. And we're going to see what we have with this team. We're going to run it back. They were a competitive team early in the season. And it was because their quarterback was playing well. The quarterback is not playing well, and now the walls are falling down. And I think that if Penix can play and manage that offense in a division that's not exactly the hardest to win, and they're a competitive team, I don't see them cleaning the house as drastically as dropping their most consistent linebacker.
I think you are right, because for me, I'd be looking to cash out. You'd be looking to cash in. Yeah. And I think that's where, at the end of the day, when you look at trades, I try to think about it from a value perspective. What value? Are you giving the other person value? Are you getting the value you want in return? Yeah. For me, if I'm able to get picks and cash out on Elliss, then to me, I'm happy. And you're getting value because you believe that he can continue. We'll find out. It could benefit both parties, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
I'm a big believer in free market capitalism.
Yeah, I'd be fine to acquire Kaden Elliss as well, Steve. If
I see defending the guest, I see both times defending the guest.
This is no way to treat a guest, man. Both of them.
Oh boy!
If you're out there and you're giving them a hard time, come on. I think if there was a more another guy behind like Kaden Elliss really pushing. I know Troy Anderson's a guy, but he's already shown, 2 years, like he just can't stay on the field, and it's hard because Troy Anderson's a guy that I've talked a lot on these IDP videos. I like him, but he just can't stay on the field, and Kaden Elliss can. He's shown he's that reliable guy. He's a smart, instinctual player, and I just think that isn't a guy that you typically see a team move on from, especially with a defensive minded head coach as well. So I think they would keep him on and let him kind of control the center of the defense there.
Really quick before we move on, nobody knew who Foye was until he started playing linebacker for Atlanta. Now, he's not Foye, obviously, but I like to think of it. Foye was available on waivers in every league I was in 3 years ago. Now he's always a top 2 linebacker pick. And I think sometimes when you get that opportunity, I believe in people just take that and they run with it. I guess that's more of a hope. And hope's not a strategy. I understand that. But like you said, gambler mentality. You're cashing out. I'm trying to cash in. That's why this is such a fun game. It's unpredictable.
Well, I think with the linebacker position, I think a lot of people in IDP get really excited about it because, they feel like it can be the top point getter on a defense. But, oftentimes you do see, kind of look at Zaire Franklin, guy who I think was a 7th-round pick, was a nobody. All of a sudden, now he's this top echelon linebacker. Nakobe Dean was left for dust. Zach Bond was even more left for dust. These guys are considered top linebackers. Jamin Sherwood was a special teamer this whole time. All of a sudden, now he's the starting. C.J. Mosley's pushed aside. All of a sudden, he's having a great year. So linebackers can kind of rise from the ashes. So he could, and he's doing well. He could continue. All right, Joe. So who is your trade target for rebuilding teams for IDP?
Yeah. So before I start, Steve, do you want to just get your homer call out of the way here before I go with my player?
Homer call? What are you talking about?
Yeah, homer call, man. I was ready for it because I'm gonna
get out of here.
It's my rebuilding target. I'm gonna go with Nik Bonitto, and
homer.
You just call it right, a homer call, exactly. I'm trying to get that out of the way early, but you didn't want to. That's fine. But look, this guy, he's 25 years old. Edge rusher. He's got 11 sacks right now. He's got a sack in 4 straight games. And I really think he's just starting to come into his own. And the Broncos have a really strong defensive line. And with Zach Allen in the middle, he's been phenomenal in being able to push the pocket, which I think is allowing these edge rushers like Nik Bonitto and Cooper to really excel. And Bonitto is always known for his speed and quick get off. He's got that, but I think he's been able to work on his pass rush moves and being able to get to the quarterback, and just really like what I've seen thus far. And I mean, he's tied for second most sacks on the season. Like I mentioned, second most in the NFL with his 11 sacks. So I just think this could be him starting to turn the corner. And I think this is a season he could potentially, continue to build on as he's a young player.
I think it's time to cash out on Nik Bonitto, to be honest with you.
Oh, boy.
I think at the end of the day, he rotates quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken, with the Denver Broncos.
They keep him fresh.
I know that, but I like you. Max Crosby plays 100% of the snaps, and he's played it for you want a guy who's going to give you a high snap count.
He's not Max Crosby.
I get that, but right, exactly. He's not Max Crosby, so he doesn't have that level of potential. I mean, no one's Max Crosby, but regardless, I think this seems like a flash in the pan to me. I think this could be an opportunity. Sacks is not is one of those numbers that is not easily repeatable. He's got 11. He's been getting sacks on a low snap count. So at the end of the day, is that going to be repeatable next year and the year after? I think people look at those gaudy numbers. They see he's second in sacks. I think you could maybe take advantage of that and be able to get something for him. He's a younger player. I see the upside. I see the value. I think for me, when you have a player like this, do you see more value in holding him on, or do you see more value in cashing him out? I think I get more value selling him than holding on him. But I see your point. I just personally would try to sell. I think Matt's going to defend you based on his reaction.
I'm ready for you, man. So I have a couple of things. You're 100% right that they do a rotation, but he has played the third most snaps in the entire defensive line and the 4th most snaps in the entire front 7 of that defense. So while he is not playing 100% like the Max Crosbys of the world, he is playing, the lion's share of what they're allowing their defense to play. And I think because of him being able to stay fresh, we're seeing elite talent and elite level production. And then I also had something that I thought was funny. Do you think you could name off the top of your head who the 2 people ahead of him in sacks are?
Well, I know one is
Trey Hendrickson. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, one more.
I was just looking at it.
2 more. Sorry.
I was just looking at it, so I feel like I can't really participate.
Andrew Van Ginkel. Can you believe that nonsense? Van Ginkel and T.J. Watt, of course, everything. So, look, I think Nik Bonitto is starting to creep into that elite category. And I think a lot of it happens to do with there's a lot of people on that defense that are credible pass rushers. And when you have elite pass rushers on the defense, Jonathan Cooper being one of them, they're going to get a lot of attention. Jonathan Cooper's played the most snaps on that entire defensive line. He is basically anchoring that line for them. And because of this, we're getting one-on-one opportunities with a young defensive end or edge rusher, whatever you want to consider him. And he is showing us he can win those matchups. That division is not the best. And that outside of the Chiefs, and even the Chiefs, I think arguably their offensive line's not the best this season. So we are seeing him get 2 games a year against the Chiefs' bad offensive line, the Raiders, and then I'm forgetting them off the top of my head. But the point is, I think the Chargers, right? So
Yep.
I don't like him against Joe Alt. Obviously, I don't think anybody would. But I do like him in those other 4 games. So you're getting 4 games a year against really good offensive line, plus whatever the rest of the season gives you. He's playing more snaps as you would think. I agree. That always makes me nervous. I don't like rotation guys. Rotation guys just freak me out. But I think if you're going to go with one, you can do worse than Bonitto.
I need to ask, did Nik Bonitto ever show up in one of your buy articles?
I just pulled it up so I could pull all those stats.
Aha! So it just so happens that YouTube coordinated before this episode, looked at the buy articles, and then came
I
on.
really did. While you were going, I was like, oh, I know this one. I got this one loaded.
This sounds
It was
very
last week,
fishy.
believe it or not. It was last week.
Wow.
And I just like he's 25 years old, man. 25 years old, has 11 sacks. He can do this another 8 years.
And you're the owner I'm looking for, Steve, the one that wants to cash out because I want to buy.
That's okay, because you're probably selling him at the highest value he's had in his career. And there's nothing wrong with that either, especially if you turn the value into wins. I mean, I don't blame you for selling him a rotational defensive end. Yeah, if you don't believe in him, sell him. But don't worry, man. I'm ready to buy.
All I have to say is one word: collusion. That's what's going on right here. It's absolute collusion. So I gotta.
Defense, you've come at me twice now.
Oh boy, that's true. That's true. You guys are ready for the backup. The final trade target of this episode here, for me, for rebuilding teams, I'm shooting for the moon, guys. And I'm going for defensive tackle Jalen Carter. He didn't start off so hot in the beginning of the year. As far as stats wise, he's been a dominant player since he's come into the league. But boy, he's been on a heater recently. Been having a ton of QB hits, and you got to remember, defensive tackles take a while to develop. So to me, he's a guy I'm really excited about, and I would pay the premium to get him because I think you're talking about a elite defensive tackle for years to come. He was heralded as that prospect when he first came out. I don't think he has shown that today. He had a decent rookie year, has had a decent sophomore year, but defensive tackles take 3, 4, 5 years to eventually, really come on the scene. So he's a guy who, maybe in order to draft him, they were, because here's the thing, right? When we're in these rookie drafts and people get so enamored with the rookie picks, when you hear that somebody is a generational prospect, they expect immediacy. And we live in a culture and a society today, they want it now. It's immediate. I want immediate satisfaction. You're not getting that immediate satisfaction from what was considered a generational prospect. So I say, go get Jalen Carter.
I can go either way on this one. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I've been burned by the guy because I did draft him as a rookie, and I did have those expectations. And he's just the player that's left me. I feel like I was holding a bottle of water in the desert, and I spilled it. That's kind of the feeling he gives me. And I feel like this season we're seeing the breakout, and that excites me. He's played the 5th most snaps on the entire defense. And he's played about 300 more than the next defensive tackle. So he is the anchor of that defense. I think Jordan Davis was the other guy that was supposed to be this generational, can't stop, won't stop, Nakobe Dean. I mean, they had those drafts for 2 or 3 years in a row where it was like they were basically all SEC team for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it was Georgia, actually, specifically.
Yeah, just give me those Bulldogs.
Yeah. So I need to see more of it because you're right. He's a baller right now. He's balling out. There's nobody that can stop this dude. He's looking like prime Aaron Donald for 2 or 3 weeks, and that's great. But the difference between prime Aaron Donald and him is Aaron Donald did it for like 7 years, and Jalen Carter's had a really cool month. And maybe that's the opportunity. Maybe that's where we finally have flip-flopped, where you're looking to buy that month and I'm looking to sell that month because I've had that month in my mind for 3 years or 2 years now, and I can finally move off of him. But at the same time, I like your aggressive mentality because you're right. Nobody values defensive tackle, especially defensive tackles that are looked at as busts. And I don't think he's a bust at all. But if you have a manager who's like me and he's like, dude, I'm waiting to get rid of this guy. I can't wait. And finally, Steve's going to bite. He's going to bite. And I'm going to sell him off. Maybe I'll look like the fool and you'll be the hero with the crown. But who knows, man? I can go either way. I won't bury you like you keep burying me, but I do think that you've got some solid points there.
Kaden Elliss in 2 seconds for Carter. You want to do the deal?
In a heartbeat. Send me.
Oh boy! All right, I'll send it to you after the episode.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, Steve. So you're giving up on the linebacker for the defensive tackle that nobody cares about.
I mean, you two may not care about him, but I think a lot of other people do.
Yeah, no, I do care about it. I mean, I was looking at it like he was potentially a bust, but I mean, he is coming around, and like you said, it does. We have seen that it just takes time for these defensive tackles to develop. I guess you're hoping that a guy with that much hype around him, and you throw. I think they just throw around generational talent way too much now with the pre-draft process. Anybody that's halfway decent is a generational talent. I think we got to stop with that. And so it's getting everyone on these early hype trains, just expecting the world as soon as these guys come out. And then when they don't live up to that potential, we're just left for disappointment. But I do think this is a good time to potentially buy him because, somebody like Matt, who was looking to just get rid of him after this good month. I mean, kind of like what you're pointing, Steve, with Nik Bonitto, just had a, really good month looking to capitalize off of it. But I think, you could buy him, and defensive tackles are hard to come by, especially elite ones. And there is a chance that he just continues to be, and turns out to be one of those elite guys.
I got one more quick thing, if you don't mind. So can you imagine being Jalen Carter and you're lauded as this wonderful can't miss prospect, and you get drafted to the Eagles, and then twice a year you're going one-on-one against Zach Martin, and you're 20 years old, and Zach Martin is a seven straight All-Pro at the guard. I mean, I don't think that is just something that is easy. And that's just one player who has to play twice a year. So think about all the other stuff. I do believe that there's this mentality in the NFL that when you come in, you're a kid. When you leave, you're a man, even if you've played for 1 or 2 years. And I do believe that guys like that are going to get picked on. And I do think that they're going to – I mean, it's not going to be just like, hey, come sack my quarterback, you generational player. You're so good, you're going to do it. Just by being on the field, you're going to get my quarterback. No, these dudes want to put that dude in the dirt. And I think sometimes early on, like you defensive tackles, they just win because those dudes are still kind of kids. And they're going against grown men that are charged with stopping them in this car crash scenario 50 to 70 times a game. And I think that's just hard to overcome at first, but maybe he's finally figured it out. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might depend a little bit on your league settings, right? We're in a 16-team league. 2 required to start 2 defensive tackles. So a guy like Carter is super valuable. But, sometimes people don't care about defensive tackles because you got D-line. But that does it for this episode. We talked about some Dynasty IDP trade targets for contending and rebuilding teams. Matt, thanks so much for joining the show today. Where can others find your great work?
You can find majority of my written content on footballguys.com. I do a weekly IDP stock market. We're going through week 17, so even if you're not in the playoffs anymore, that's okay. We can talk about players to acquire for next season, trying to steer the content a little bit to, hey, if you're trying to win your playoffs now, here's the guy to go get. But also in the long term, here's what I think about this player. So I try to do that. And then I do YouTube content for RPO football. Majority of the time I do with IDP 5, which is just kind of 5 players, 2 good, 2 bad, and 1 sleeper every week, just to try to keep it a little bit fun. We all talk about stuff, but everybody wants to find that dive into the rough. And I kind of like that kind of content too. So. And then all the socials you can think of, X, Blue Sky, TikTok, if Vine was still around, it'd be on Vine, and I'm at Matt Monty FF.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Matt, for joining the show. We really enjoyed having you on. Hopefully you all enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.